Hi, this is Tom Needham, and you are listening to the Sounds podcast and Sounds of Film radio show. Today, we're going to be delving into one of the most intriguing and mysterious events in UFO lore, the 1973 Pascagoula abduction case. Our guest is Darcy Weir, the acclaimed director behind the gripping new documentary series Pascagoula 73. Through archival footage, interviews, and fresh perspectives, this four-part series re-examines the astonishing accounts of Charles Hickson, Calvin Parker, and others who claim to have encountered extraterrestrial beings that fateful night. Darcy has spent years investigating the unknown, shedding light on UFO phenomena and the people profoundly affected by these experiences. Darcy, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Tom, I'm happy to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Fascinating series. What drew you to this case, and why did you decide to create a documentary about it?
Yeah, I've been, delving into this rabbit hole for over a decade now. That is the UFO, UAP, anomalous phenomenon rabbit hole. And I was contacted by a British writer who has actually compiled an amazing amount of data around this case. His name's Philip Mantle. He's featured. He's kind of like the narrator to this docu series.
Hmm.
He's a British man, but he contacted Calvin Parker some time ago, helped him write his biography, his own book, and Philip's been involved in UFO cases from across Europe because he's based out of the UK. But he took a great interest in this American case, and he helped rewrite Charlie Hickson's book and republish that, and subsequent books on this case. So he had documents and pictures and all kinds of testimony from a myriad of witnesses that saw the objects that night or around that time. I think there was a UFO flap going on in the 70s. And he put that all together and, helped me find this great material. And I just put it into a film documentary format. And it was fun.
It is fun to watch too. Can you give our listeners a little bit of a sense of the culture in 1973? That's one of the things that's kind of fun about watching this documentary is going back to 1973 and seeing how things looked back then, how people dressed, what society was like. Give us a little sense.
Okay. Well, we're post uh, hippie 60s era. We're into the funk and disco era. So things were a little bit more, jive. And these men were in Mississippi. They lived in a community that was based around a river called Pascagoula. They call it the Singing River because it apparently it sings. And it's a very southern drawl sort of area. People are hardworking, working class, mainly in this part of the world. And they both, Calvin was actually only 19 years old. He had just moved into the area to start working at this shipyard site with the help of his elder friend, who's 42 years old at the time, Charlie Hickson. And they were family friends. Basically, um, Charlie was friends with Calvin's father, and they were trying to hook him up. The interesting thing is that Calvin had just started working at the shipyard. He just bought a car, brand new car, and he the same day that he decided to take out this car for a ride with his elder friend, Charlie Hickson, he essentially was abducted. And an interesting way of putting it, apparently, he was hired abducted and fired in the same day because after they were dropped off, um, the media found out about this incident when it was reported to the police. Somebody leaked it at the police station, and the next day, basically the foreman of the site said, "Look, I can't deal with all this press that's here to see you guys. Um, so, Charlie, you can take a little leave because you've been here for a while, but Calvin, you're fired." So it wasn't a very pleasant experience for these men,
Mm.
but they both dealt with it in their own way, and we kind of cover that in the docu series. And we have all this archival from the time, so you really capture the essence of what they were going through in the 1970s.
There's been so many different stories through the years of people claiming to be abducted, but this incident in particular is pretty well known. You just described it. I don't know if it's that well known to all of our listeners, but in your opinion, what is special about this particular case that would merit a four-part documentary series?
Yeah. First of all, I think that the beings they encountered were very different. A lot of people that say that they've been abducted recall seeing these short, sometimes tall, very skinny, gray skinned beings with large craniums and big black eyes, sometimes wearing some kind of suit, sometimes kind of naked, but a creepy, unearthly looking creature. And some people call them grays. In this case, these men, they saw this creature that had no eyes, no ears, no mouth. They had these three spikes protruding from their heads. They had this like wrinkly elephant like skin, and they basically hovered around. They had these pincer type hands, and they were apprehended by those. The men both described them as being kind of like robots.
Hmm.
So that's a standout. That's different, and I like that. I think it makes the case very interesting. Additionally, um, you know, there are commonalities with other abduction cases. So the men did describe being examined. One of them described blood being taken. Jerry and Maria Blair are new witnesses that we covered in episode 3. So the way I broke it down in this 4-part series is episode 1 is Charlie Hickson's experience, the 42-year-old man, his background, how he dealt with the case, how he became like the storyteller of it at first to the public. The second episode is Calvin Parker. He was younger. He was in much more distress. He didn't have that worldly experience. And he didn't want the public attention. So he stayed away for a long time for fear, and it really affected his life, this case. Eventually, he came around to becoming comfortable about talking about it. And we got to hear his side of the story, which was very different. When they both went aboard the craft, they were separated. And Calvin had a full examination, strange experience with multiple entities. And then Charlie was put into a room and just an orb examined him. He was kind of hovering and being examined by some kind of technology. Very different. And so the third episode, we have this new abductee that said they were on the other side of the river that night, and they were also taken after those men were deposited back. And she claims, Maria Blair, that her and her husband were both taken throughout time. And so, again, different experience, very, strange and interesting. But, I think all of it's very valid. The last episode, which is the fourth, we actually paid tribute to Philip Mantle. It's a bit of a biography, how he got involved with the case and where he started in ufology over in Britain and started covering Europe and British cases and abductees before he got into the Pascagoula abduction case. So it was a cool way to sort
Mm.
of wrap the whole experience and everybody that's involved with the story.
Can you just tell us, backtrack a little bit about your background, why you first got interested in this subject, and where you stand personally in terms of your belief about these things?
Sure. So my name's Darcy Weir, and when I was in English lit at a young age, my teacher would read the attendance Weir apostrophe D and ask me if I could change my middle name to Oscar so he could say weirdo. Um, so I've always been a kind of weirdo, I guess. I've been interested in, the sci-fi ideas of the fringe, and ufology is like a really interesting area of study. And I've been documenting stories in this realm, in this phenomenon since 2009. I've produced over 15 feature-length documentaries at this time, all different stories. Um, and I really like documentary filmmaking. I think sometimes fact or real world stories can be stranger than fiction. And that's what I like to do, and I've been doing it, trying to get better every film that I release, and incorporating animation and uh, different talents from around the world. I'm working on a documentary that features Thomas Jane right now, a really cool actor who's also interested in this subject. So yeah, I'm really happy to be in this lane, even though it's relegated for weirdos like me.
Well, it's becoming more mainstream these days. Um, I guess kind of going back to my last question, where do you stand now? Like you've covered a lot of different stories throughout your career, and this one in particular, you go in deep. I noticed, for instance, in this film, a lot of the people um, that investigated this didn't necessarily believe in this stuff beforehand, but they all felt that the subjects were being sincere in their stories. Do you have a similar take?
Well, I think that the phenomenon is very real. I think that UFOs are real from all my years of studying this. I think that we're dealing with a myriad of possible intelligence that are interacting with the planet. I think that there's probably human made craft that we think are alien craft, but really are just some kind of secret technology that's being sequestered by the military agencies of the world, space agencies, so to speak. But I am convinced, obviously, that there's got to be some frauds and some attention seekers out there. It's just natural. Any really interesting phenomenon like this, you're going to have some charlatans. And I have covered some of that stuff in a recent expose called Dark Alliance, which is on Tubi TV, Roku, and Amazon Prime internationally. That's a two-part docu-series, each an hour and a half. And we covered some people that made up some stories and tried to profit off of the UFO phenomenon.
Mm.
So I'm into a mix of reporting on this stuff, and I do think that there is something very credible about all of this, but I also think there's some non-credible, credible stories that come from this community and this phenomenon.
And I have to ask your take on all the drones recently. What do you think is going on with that?
Yeah, based on your accent, you sound like you're close to that issue.
Yeah.
Um, Well, I think that honestly, a lot of that drone activity is just man-made objects.
Hmm.
Um, I don't think that it's like some foreign adversary because I really don't think I think that's an act of war, and it would essentially we would know about that for sure in the public if it were a foreign age in foreign agency operating their technology over, the United States. I do think it was some kind of American operation, and I think they were either looking for something or they're running this operation to possibly run um, obfuscation of something very real that was in the sky there. And if you look at the myriad of UFO videos that were being released at the time, drones were in the sky plus UFOs. So we might have had a bit of a UFO flap over Jersey. And the way that the US intelligence or defense agencies were dealing with it was to run interference and make sure to convince everybody there was only drone activity there.
Mm,
Um, Bit of a psyop, in my opinion.
that's interesting. Um, this is a very intriguing series that you have. Can you tell us a little bit about hypnosis? Um, I found the parts where hypnotism is used to try and get to the story through the people that experienced it. Um, Tell our listeners a little bit about how hypnosis is used and what you learned about it.
Yeah, hypnosis is not magic. It's not, in my opinion, some way to get the greatest truth and only the truth from an individual, but it is a mechanism or a tool for a therapist to use to make somebody comfortable. That's what you have to realize, um, demystifying that in the most simplest ways is that most of the time somebody needs hypnosis, it's because they're uncomfortable about an issue that they can't normally talk about. And in this case, they were suffering from some kind of post-traumatic stress after they were abducted. Um, for Calvin Parker, for many years, he could not talk about this case, especially in the public. But he has undergone so many hypnosis sessions at this point. By the time the film, you see that hypnosis session, that was basically his last ever recorded before he passed away. And I'm convinced he's had probably around 20 hypnosis sessions up until that point. So a therapist is trying to get you so comfortable that you can recall a case that you're otherwise very, very uncomfortable talking about. And if you look at the way he recalls that incident, he is very comfortable. He just
Mm.
speaks it plainly. He tells the story, right? You're focusing, you're listening to your memories, and you're recalling. With Maria Blair, she that was her very first hypnosis. And if you look at the way she acts, she's very scared. She's actually kind of panicked and almost crying most of the hypnosis
Mm.
because she hasn't had many hypnosis sessions. Maybe this was the first one. I don't know. But I think she was very uncomfortable. So I think after multiple hypnosis sessions, you can unlock that comfort level and you can finally talk about something very candidly. And I guess that's how I would relate the two sessions that you see in the series.
And one of the more intriguing things that I was unfamiliar with um, until watching your movie is that sometimes when people are abducted, they can start to, or they claim to start to be able to have glimpses into the future and even the past. Can you give us an example of that that people might be able to look for in your film?
Okay. Well, with this case, the men both reported subsequent abductions, to be honest. They talked about the major incident at the Pascagoula River, and then afterwards they got revisited by the same interested party, apparently. And in both of them, they recalled sort of like, well, actually, Charlie said maybe he didn't get abducted again, but he started getting sort of telepathic messages. I'll sort of restate that. Um, Calvin, on the other hand, said that he was taken again, and in subsequent abductions, he had communications from an entity that was like a lady that was on board the craft that seemed to be kind of like operating these drone type robot beings that were apprehending them. And the lady had given images that there would be war on the horizon, maybe atomic, like nuclear attacks that would play out. And, the Earth's environment would be uh, under some level of destruction, pollution, that type of thing, a lot of strife and chaos. So I think with abduction cases, we often hear these messages, or even experiencers, people that say that they've met a non-human intelligence. They get these telepathic messages
Hmm.
that warn of a future that may be involving certain levels of chaos and destruction. And that's very interesting to me that many different experiencers or abductees report the same sort of thing. It's kind of like a, confluence or a point of relevant data.
Well, Darcy, this is really interesting, but we do have to wrap it up. If anyone is intrigued by all of this, where can people go to watch your series?
Yeah, so it's on Amazon Prime, four-part docu series. I hope people enjoy it. If they want to check out some of my older films, they can go to my studio site, www.occultjourneys.com. And I'm on Twitter of the same handle, Occult Journeys, and Darcy Weir Films on Instagram. So happy to interact with people, and feel free to DM me or email me.
Darcy, thank you so much, and I hope that we can speak again.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Nice talking with you.
Yeah, same here. Take it easy. Bye bye.